So this is just a quick guide to the early meta that we've seen in Overwatch 2 so far. With the death of the anchor and the end of the default setup, supports are incredibly vulnerable to hard engages. Tanks can just run up and engage through main, DPS are more difficult to scout and contest on the flank, and there's no off-tank peel when a dive does come in. This is where Ana Lucio gets popular, since they can both rotate away from enemy engages, as well as support their team from a safer distance. Importantly, they can also help turn duels for their teammates on the flank, as well as get their own angle on the engage if they can out-rotate the enemy backline. But overall, that dive threat versus supports starts to slow down the game, as supports play further back or on an angle. With scouting being more difficult, DPS moving faster, and there being no off-tank to contest flanks, DPS were initially able to get away with big flanks. Genjis could run around solo and stage for enemy backlines, soldiers could sprint around the map to get wide angles, and so on. But once backlines started playing further back and ready to boost away, and teams became better at scouting these flanks, they also became better at punishing them. So we also have heavy dive threat versus DPS hard committing to flanks, which forces the DPS to play a little bit slower and skirmish for the flanks, rather than just kind of sprint towards the enemy backline. This kind of slowing down of playstyle happens a lot whenever dive mirrors a meta, but it's especially apparent in 5v5. With DPS not playing as greedy on the angles, and supports being ready to kite versus enemy engages, catching enemy dives becomes very strong. This is one of the main reasons that we saw Doom and Genji do so well in week 1, but get countered a lot more in week 2, as teams got better at scouting and denying these engages. This brings us to the rising popularity of Zarya comps, since we need a way to force an enemy dive while still having threat onto the enemy backline so that they can't support and engage. And on the tighter maps at least, Zarya is one of the best tanks at doing these things. She can open fights with Ana Pocket from range, which enables her to walk up and pressure the enemy tank, which forces a reaction from the enemy team. They can either try to focus her, in which case she has Pocket and can be greedy with her bubbles, and should be able to absorb a huge amount of enemy resources while her DPS get value elsewhere, or while her team stabilizes, ready to push once the enemy are in downtime. This is exactly what we see here, with Zarya pressuring frontline and Gladiators responding by dumping resources into her, which she easily trades for bubble and nano to stabilize, then pushes back into an enemy team that has no cooldowns. When she opens fights in frontline, it's also likely the enemy will try and dive past her. Here, the backline just kites back and focuses on catching the people coming in, while the Zarya, with her extra health and 2 bubbles, is able to play for herself without support for the several seconds it will take her backline to clear the divers. During this time, she'll be threatening to trade on the enemy backline and stopping them from getting good LOS onto the dive. And in 5v5, it's often that backline LOS that makes or breaks a dive. In this example, we can see Zarya pressuring in frontline with her Reaper, which forces Gladiators to take a weak dive that the backline have a good chance of surviving, especially with the nano. Meanwhile, the threat of the Zarya in frontline stops Gladiator's backline from pushing up and following through with the dive, which buys the time her backline needs to clear the divers. On the attack, where you don't have the space to start fights like that, Zarya can use bubbles on DPS like Reaper and Tracer in order to zone enemies or make a distraction that the core can use to push up into a stronger position or to clear split targets, kinda similar to how the Monkey Zarya comp is played in 6v6. This example here is pretty clinical. Reaper goes in with bubble to draw attention and split backline LOS from the Monkey's attempt at a trade, so that his core can easily clear the Monkey. This forces bubble and jump back, at which point the Zarya team can easily push in to exploit the enemy downtime, which is exactly how Dallas can chase the point and brawl out the fight, even though they lose Genji in the process. So hopefully we can see how when Zarya comps are played correctly, they can safely force opening cooldown commitments from the enemy team while not risking a whole lot themselves. Then once the enemy go into downtime, it's an easy push forward to clean up the fight. This is the skirmish playstyle in action, and we'll be seeing a lot more of it in Overwatch 2. Thanks for watching, and let me know if there's any other aspects or comps in Overwatch 2 that you want to learn more about.